Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Chesley McNeil. Each weekday, we're looking at stories, making headlines, and bringing experts from our community to give their take. Here's a look back at some of the top takes from this week and how those in the know are seeing those stories that impact you. Talking about West Nile, new numbers show mosquito traps in Fulton County have now tested positive for West Nile virus. We know 2 of those traps were in Grove Park and Northwest Atlanta, and then Hoyt Smith Recreation Center in Hapeville. So far, there has been 1 confirmed human case of West Nile statewide that was reported in Muskogee County. With the affected mosquitoes now being detected in multiple parts of the state and the metro area, how concerned should we be? Let's bring in an expert right now here to answer some of those questions. El McGray, he is a research professional with UGA's College of Agricultural and Environmental Science. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Great. It's good to be here, Chesley.
All right, let's talk about it, man. How concerned should we be about these cases?
It's certainly something to be aware of. We're right on the front end of it, so it's going to continue to pick up. Activity is going to increase as the rest of the summer progresses. The peak period for West Nile transmission is August 15th to September 15th, so we're right on the front edge of it right now.
Wow, yeah, 53 cases of West Nile in Georgia last year, the highest in years. Are we prepared or better prepared for this season coming, or you think it could get worse?
I wouldn't say we're better prepared. Funding is important. The states and counties need support for their people. So there's testing going on in Georgia, but it's kind of in nodes, in pockets. Certainly Fulton County, Chatham County. There's some work done over in Richmond County as well. So it's kind of nodes of activity. But when these positives tests pop up, should make everyone aware.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought, of course. How do mosquito surveillance teams actually detect West Nile in the traps?
Okay, what's going on is they're collecting the mosquitoes. The southern house mosquito is the primary mosquito that transmits West Nile virus in the southeast. So there's traps that are specifically kind of set to target this species. The female mosquito is collected, and they are ground up and tested molecularly in the labs to see if the virus is present in the mosquitoes.
Now, it's obviously for me, I wouldn't be able to detect that. You mentioned a certain kind of mosquito. For me, they all look the same, right? So how do I know what to avoid, or can I even avoid it?
You should try to avoid all of them. Anything we can do to minimize the mosquito populations is important. We talked about this previously. They require standing water to develop. Now we're drying out a little bit. The southern house mosquito likes to develop in the storm drains. So where the water lays in the pipes, when it doesn't rain, that water lays in place underground, and the mosquitoes often develop underground in the storm drain pipes.
Gotcha. How confident are you in the current surveillance system that we have to prevent an outbreak?
The surveillance is going to pick up the activity. That's up to the counties and the districts to do the control to prevent the outbreak. So it's really kind of a 2-part system, detecting when the virus is being transmitted, and then the counties and state people to do control. It's more of a county situation where counties are doing the control. Fulton County contracts, they have a really good group working with them. So it's kind of a up and down. Certain areas do more than others.
We've talked about specific communities. We talked about Hapeville, Grove Park, those areas. How worried should they be?
You just need to be aware and try to take preventions. If you're going to be out in the evenings, particularly just before dark, that's a time when you want to use an EPA-approved repellent to try to prevent the mosquito bites. That's the whole thing, is preventing mosquito-borne disease, is preventing that female mosquito from biting you.
And you said DEET was the best way to do that. I remember you were on the show before. You told us DEET was the best way.
There's a number of products that are approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. DEET is kind of the gold standard, been around a very long time, very effective. There's low concentrations, there's high concentrations if you're going to be out for long periods of time. But there's other products. There's oil of lemon eucalyptus is a natural born product, very effective. It's important to read the labels. Parents would apply the repellents to their hands and then rub it on the children. DEET's approved for children as young as 2 months of age, so it's a very safe product.
Yeah. How has protection from mosquitoes evolved over time to, from where we were to where we are now?
Ah, that's a good question. It's been going on a long time.
Yeah.
They've been identified for over a century now. Um, Eliminating standing water, ditching of marshes has always been a big thing. So that's certainly been part of it. DEET has been around since the 50s, so the repellent aspect is a long proven history. And another thing, light colored, loose fitting clothes. We got all these breathable fabrics now, so that's helpful. It makes you less attractive to the female mosquito. And even box fans. We might have talked about this as well.
Yeah.
If you're going to be on your deck or patio, you don't want to use a repellent, put a box fan on you. You're going to feel better, and it's going to keep. They're not really strong flyers. They're a small, light mosquito insect. So a fan goes a long ways to preventing their activity.
Georgia's Public Service Commission just approved a massive expansion of energy production, at least 6,000 new megawatts by the year 2031, mostly to meet projected demands from data centers. Some are questioning whether the projections are overblown and if ratepayers would be stuck with footing that bill. With us now is Patty Duran, the founder of Georgians for Affordable Energy. Patty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Let's get started with this. You think Georgia Power is exaggerating the expected energy demand from data centers, and why might you think that?
Georgia Power has a long history of exaggerating load growth forecasts, beginning with, well, I don't know when they began, but I know that during the lead up to Plant Vogtle units 3 and 4, they predicted an annual growth rate of 4%. That did not occur in the entire 15 years of the project. That's how far off they were. And the commission has never held them accountable for their false load growth. And as a result, Georgia's grid is bloated. There's a professional term called gold-plated, which means it's very overbuilt.
So you think their track record is not reliable at all when it comes to forecasting the needs, right?
It's not only not reliable, but even in this forecast, they were challenged by not only all the interveners, which are what third parties are called, but even by the Public Service Commission staff and also data center clients. Pretty much everyone that doesn't have a financial interest in how much energy is added to the grid challenged their estimates.
Your group advocates for affordable and clean energy. What alternative path would you have recommended instead of this 6,000 to 8,500 megawatt expansion?
There's a new paper that was released by Duke University's Energy, Environment, and Sustainability Institute in February that said, and actually it's the most exciting academic paper in energy circles that has been released in the last many years, that shows that actually no new energy growth is needed to meet all the data center needs in the country if data centers were just managed a little differently in how they interact with the grid, using different load curtailment, demand response, and other solutions to the grid that are available now. But of course, this commission did not care about that paper or acknowledge that paper. And in fact, they disregarded a lot of expert testimony during the 3 sets of hearings that led up to their decision.
Are there some other states or some other examples out there of how people are using it more efficiently that you can state?
I don't know that answer, but I would say probably not just yet because data centers are new to the game. In fact, ChatGPT was just introduced about 2 years ago. It's hard to imagine how quickly all of these data centers have arrived on the scene. I will say that in Georgia, we are particularly in a precarious situation because our commissioners have rubber stamped almost everything Georgia Power has ever asked for. And it's one of the reasons that Georgia Power bills are 5th highest in the nation. And I also examined data from FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and learned that Georgia Power's profits per customer are higher than any utility of its size, which are 2 million customers and above. Georgia Power has 2.8 million customers. Georgia Power earns more profit than any other utility, and even the second place one, which was Florida Power and Light, was far behind Georgia Power in terms of profits, and that's because of this commission.
Yeah, Patty, what do you say to those folks who think that data centers are an economic boom?
They're not an economic boon. That's the issue. They bring hardly any jobs. The data centers are don't require any engineering expertise once they're set up. And they do require a lot of energy if they're not managed properly, which they're not being in Georgia, and a huge amount of water, which we don't even know how much water because there have been no studies or any examinations of data center water needs in Georgia. And while we have plenty of water, that doesn't mean that we won't have droughts, and it doesn't mean that the huge amount of water that data centers are requiring isn't a risk to water tables and water areas around the state.
For a rough few days for the airline industry, Alaska Airlines is back up and running after an IT outage on Sunday. The grounding lasted a few hours and impacted more than 200 flights, and delays stretched into Monday. Last Friday, the pilot of a Delta Airlines regional plane flew by SkyWest had to perform a go-around maneuver after nearly colliding with a B-52 bomber before landing in North Dakota. The pilot had to perform what is being described as an aggressive maneuver, and followed by an apology to his passengers. No one was hurt on that SkyWest airline, but it's now being investigated by SkyWest. The FAA is gathering more information as we speak. Also on Friday, this scary sight right here, Delta Airlines flying to Atlanta from Los Angeles. You can see that left engine right there of the Boeing 757 caught fire right there. See that engine right there? They had to turn that plane around, take it back. Yeah, carrying 226 passengers and 9 crew members on board. Made that precautionary return, landed safely in Los Angeles. But what a scary moment for a lot of people right there, especially if you're looking at the window and you're seeing that fire right there. You're thinking, hey, what is going on? Now, are these recent incidents part of a broader pattern? And what do we do as they reveal these current pressures on the nation's aviation industry? We've been talking about this for a little while now. Here to answer some questions for us is Dr. Laura Garrow. She's been on the show before. Welcome back to the show. Talk to us about this, right? We've been seeing engine fires, near misses with other planes, and some hits, some collisions. Is this a fluke in what we're seeing? We've been talking about this here lately, or is this some kind of bigger problem that we're seeing with the airline industry?
Yeah, so we've had quite a few incidents, right, happen in the last couple days. So I think I'm going to answer that question as part of it seems like it's a fluke, and part of it may be more systematic into larger issues we want to look at. So I'll start with the fluke is likely the engine fire, right, that Delta experienced. Delta, I mean, again, engine fires are pretty rare. But they can happen. Most common reason might be, for instance, a little bit of you have a fuel leak going in. But engines are designed with redundancy, firewalls. So when a fire does happen, it really contains it to the engine. So again, you have the opportunity to land safely, contain the fire, etc. The ones that more concern me are, again, things related to the technology, right? So looking at the near-miss collision with the B-52 bomber, an IT outage. That's really systematic of the fact that we've got an aging infrastructure on our air transportation side, both on, the air traffic control side that would be held by FAA, as well as, some of the possible airlines upgrading. And this isn't the first time we've seen this. So again, part of it's a fluke, I would say, but part of it is more longer systematic issues that we need to address.
I was going to say that Newark comes to mind, of course, when we talk about infrastructure and needing to upgrade the infrastructure. I mean, is that a huge overhaul? Is that something we can't afford? Is that something that it sounds like we need to do it right away. Can we?
So in the big beautiful bill, there was just $12.5 billion that was passed to help start those air traffic control upgrades. Those include things like putting in new towers, radar systems, for instance, to help on, the communications going in. Duffy has asked, though, Congress to consider giving him another, I think, $19 billion, which is what he says he needs to actually get that plan in place. So it's a big undertaking, but I think we are, making headway towards that finally. But yeah, it's a big undertaking. Some of these systems go back to 1950s, 1960s. So we really do need to start looking at the upgrades.
You look at that fire on that plane. We've seen incidents of that. We've seen even smaller planes. I'm thinking about the one in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area that went down. It raises a lot of concerns. Should people really be concerned, or do you think, again, flukish, maybe we should just keep flying?
Yeah, so again, I can only answer this personally, right? So, I mean, I've worked in aviation for 20 years, but when these things happen, I know as a traveler, I myself also get nervous going back up. And what I keep reminding myself is that air transportation, despite these, little flukes, let's say, is still the safest form of transportation. It's much safer getting into an airplane than it is getting into our car and, going down the connector. And there are multiple places that we look at designing for redundancy, like I mentioned, the fire on the plane, but also safety checks. So when these incidents happen, for instance, there's a panel that comes in that reviews what happens and, if needed, makes recommendations almost immediately for how to correct it so it doesn't happen in the future. So again, one of the things I'm hoping for is that, we've had a couple near misses, right? And, a hit out of DC with a military and commercial aircraft, right? So that, to my mind, means that we really need to review how that communication's happening between military and commercial aircraft and how to avoid potential conflicts in the airspace.
I'm sure you've seen this. Yeah, it's a moment that has gone viral. It's really sweeping the nation. During a recent Coldplay concert in Boston, a couple got caught on a kiss cam, and then they quickly broke apart. The man, identified as Andy Byron, he's the CEO of an IT company called Astrometer, and the woman is the company's chief people officer head, Kristen Cabot. Now, this prompted Coldplay, the lead singer, Chris Martin, to say either they are having an affair or they're very shy. Could be funny, right? But not for the families, right? Byron and Cabot are each married to other people, all right? Byron has since resigned from the company as CEO, and the moment has reignited discussions about workplace ethics, privacy rights, and how social media amplifies personal events. With us now is Lauren Jackson, a life coach and dating a life and dating coach and founder and CEO of mental health practice Cultivate Your Essence. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Are you ready for this? Let's get to this thing.
I'm putting my mental health therapist hat to good use with this story, so yes.
All right, so we've been diving into this incident, and since it first took place, it's all over social media now. People have been mimicking it, redoing it, even at sporting events and so forth and so on. Let's start with your first reaction when you saw this. What did you think?
You know what? I think what made it worse was the fact that they amplified it by their reaction. And if you notice, both of them knew they were in the wrong. But the problem was, even in a romantic relationship, he wasn't even there to protect her in that moment. So again, when you're thinking about superiority versus her role, there is a power dynamic there that shows I'm going to save myself at all costs and I'm going to leave you to the wolves. And this is a perfect example of that.
Whoa. All right. So, the woman hit her face, the man ducked down, the band even made a joke of it. This is a public place, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, do you think they thought they could hide from people? I mean, they got caught on camera, obviously, but this is a public place, right?
Well, yes, but if you look at how their body language was, they had been used to doing this in public numerous times. That's what I'm assuming.
Good point. Good point.
But also too, let's think about it. What's the chances that you are going to end up on the kiss cam? Now, there's a 50-50 chance there. But if this has become a normal behavior, why would you think anything different? And it seems as though this isn't uncommon practices within the company. Because there seems to be some allegations even around, is this his first time messing around with somebody in the company as well? So if there's a mindset there that's stating that I am in leadership, I am the CEO, I can do pretty much what I want, but this is the first time I'm being held accountable and on such a public platform.
Yeah.
Now it's actually giving me the chance to think, oh, well, I could possibly get caught on a bigger stage.
Mentally, talk to me about public shame. Like, obviously they were mortified, right? She turns around, she's covering her face. He ducks all the way down, trying to hide. Mental shame, what does that do to us?
Well, here's the thing about shame, because I think sometimes when we look at it, it definitely can be used as a tool to manipulate, right? But also it's a way of holding a mirror to your actions. You can't run away from everything. So now you actually have to confront the very things that you thought was going to be hidden in the dark. So the more you're actually being hit with, my actions are now having a global impact, Because when I say global, let's think about it. It's not just the families that are impacted. It's the whole company's
Right.
culture within that, right? So now there is a whole thing about I have to resign. Now we have to think about how is this going to impact the company culture? How are employees going to work? Can they trust HR at any point in time? Now you've created a whole dynamic that's bigger than just you. So while it is hurtful in the moment and very embarrassing, now it gives you some tangible things to walk away about and reflect on your mindset.
I do want to talk about the families affected by it, but I want to ask you this before we get to that. To me, they were bold with this because, I mean, if you're out in public and you're doing this, you're saying, hey, look, I don't care. But then you get caught on camera and you want to act shame. Like, is there a mental thing behind that?
Well, I think, when you've been able to get away with something for so long, until the rug is literally pulled under you, why would you think anything differently? It's no different than when somebody puts a boundary down, say, hey, don't do that. But if the behavior has continued and you've allowed me to do it, but now you're actually holding me accountable, that's the only thing that's going to make me change that behavior in the first place.
Yeah.
Because if I've been able to get away with it, it's been conditioned. And on top of it, who is going to challenge you?
Well, Coldplay now, right?
From a corporate standpoint, even if you're thinking about it from a family standpoint, I'm sure this isn't the first time.
Wow. So talk to me about the families that are affected by this. What's the first emotional step to take there if you're the spouse at home and you're watching this obviously online, or you're seeing it for the first time, or even one of your friends show it to you?
I think the first thing you just have to do is just allow yourself to be with the emotion and just process, because there's a grieving process that's going on here, right? First, there's the initial shock of, is this really happening? Then everything is setting in. Then on top of it, because social media has amplified it at that point, do what you need to do to protect your own emotional boundaries from that standpoint, right? So it may be, hey, I'm going to turn off all my notifications. I'm going to log off of social media for a little bit. I'm going to talk to my mental health therapist. I'm going to talk to my family. Or I might just need to remove myself from the home just to be able to process it. Or I may not need to talk to you or even want to see you for a while, because now I have to come to terms with emotionally, I am challenged to do something that I may not have been prepared to do in this moment.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to kind of gear myself up just to, one, again, I have to stress this because a lot of times we don't think about it. Grieve. Grieve what was, grieve the relationship, grieve the embarrassment, grieve the idea of, I said vows to this person. And this is how I was betrayed on a global stage.
Yeah. Let's take the cheating out of it for a moment. Typically, at least me growing up, I heard you should never date where you work, right? Talk to me about those relationships, romantic relationships at the workplace. Is that just a bad thing to do, or can it work?
Well, I think it can work because you got to think about it. Where do we spend majority of our time as adults? In the workplace. So it isn't going to be something that's uncommon for you to date. However, there needs to be boundaries and there needs to be an understanding of what that company culture says about dating in the workplace, right? Because again, there's a power dynamic in this particular situation. If it was just like another person with another person and they're on the same equal footing, the chances of things going bad, it's still there, but at the same time, the ramifications of it may not be on such a higher level. So, really check into the place of, is this worth, if everything goes wrong, can I still feel comfortable working in this setting,
Wow.
right? And then also too, again, let's take this into account. What are your boundaries? And I stress this a lot because a lot of times we can just find ourselves falling into different situations. But how you respond versus how you react is how you can create the boundaries around how do we want to go about this relationship, and do people in leadership need to know so that there's not a conflict there.
It's a growing and costly invasion. Wild pigs are tearing through Georgia's farmland, and the price tag is adding up fast. Now, a new study out of UGA shows just how much damage these animals are causing, not just to crops, but also to our entire ecosystem. Here now with us is Justine Smith. She's a UGA doctoral candidate and lead author on this study. Justine, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Justine, what made you, what drew you to this particular study in the first place?
I figured that was going to be asked, and I think it's always a good one. Honestly, I started this project with camera trapping with wild pigs, and my project is a collaborative effort between the University of Georgia, the Jones Center at Itchaway, the Flint River Soil and Water Conservation District, and USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. Now, that's a lot of entities together, but ultimately what started this is the Jones Center had a drone, and they said if I wanted to use it, I absolutely could. And UGA was offering a course, Introduction to Remote Sensing, Drone Flights, Introduction to the Part 107, and how to get that certification. And I decided to take it. And working on these properties with farming, I was incredibly motivated to try to quantify this damage. And I was given the supplies, I was taught, and a lot of trust, and I was able to go out and fly these fields and assess this damage.
Was there a movement or something that alerted you to the problem?
So wild pigs has been a growing problem in the US for quite some time. And so my project was actually funded from the pilot program, which was provided by the 2018 Farm Bill grant. So it's a congressional thing ultimately. And so there were 20 pilot program studies that started in about 2020, and I was one of them. And that started the shift into researching wild pigs in general. A lot of this did camera trapping, while Wildlife Services conducted on-site removals. And then we were also able to branch out. So in Georgia, I was the only pilot program. There was also one on the Florida-South Georgia border. And there are also other pilot program studies down in the Southeast too. And some others have also explored using drones to assess damage in their respective states.
Is that where the problem exists? Is it more wild pigs in the southeastern portion of the state or some other portion of the state? And what are the problems that they're causing?
Okay, good question. So ultimately, as of last year, if I'm remembering this map correctly, wild pigs have been reported in 29 states in the U.S. And most of those states are congregated in the Southeast. Wild pigs were initially introduced in the Southeast in around the 1500s by Spanish explorers, and ultimately the population has slowly expanded over time. And because they're an invasive, the damages associated with them and the lack of natural predators, they have a generalist diet, and their high capacity to reproduce is just kind of added into this problem. And so, yes, there's a lot of them in the Southeast in general. And so it has just become an increasing problem. And I'm very thankful that there's more attention coming to it.
Yeah. What type of problem are they causing?
Oh, right. Sorry. So most of their damage is associated with their rooting behavior. Their rooting behavior, they take their noses and they dig up in the ground. And especially with this study, they will go in and root up the seeds that farmers unfortunately just planted, ultimately causing damage and the lack of production, which then leads to the monetary loss. Yeah.
Is there anything that surprised you about your findings with the amount of damage that they're causing?
For my findings, truthfully, I was... The monetary value, always putting things into perspective, is shocking in itself. But ultimately, I think this study brings to light the fact that wild pigs have been a problem, will be a problem, and are going to be an ongoing problem. And so it needs to be a collaborative effort continuing forward. You need to work with your neighbors, you need to work with your agencies and things like that to really help mitigate this issue. And so I think just putting the numbers into perspective is what was the most shocking part for me. Gotcha.
Now, is this a problem where they're growing too fast, too soon? Could we see them in the metro area?
I don't think so. In that distribution map that I was talking about beforehand, in Georgia in particular, it's on the county level. Wild pigs have been reported in every county, but I cannot see them in the grand sense, being in the metro area for a long period of time. I'm sure it was simply passing, as they are more apt to be in a wild setting.
All right, so do you love where you live? Is it a great place to work? A new survey by CNBC breaks down all 50 U.S. states and looks for the best places for business and quality of life. Let's start with the positive. It found that the Peach State, 7th overall when it comes to business, with Georgia scoring top 10 marks with regards to overall economy, infrastructure, and workforce. As my mom would say, we also have room to grow, a lot of room to improve according to this survey when it comes to quality of life in our state. It ranked Georgia 45th out of 50 and gave us an F, one of 9 states to get that failing grade. Among the metrics that led to the score were crime rates in Georgia, both violent crime and property crime. Also, issues with overall health care access and poor quality over the environment. So let's get inside the numbers now with Tommy Pierce, Executive Director of the nonprofit data and research group Neighborhood Nexus. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, we all have our pro and con lists, right? Things we love, the issues we see around us, but these rankings seem to send a mixed message here. What's your take?
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really see Georgia in the middle of these lists. We always seem to be right at the top or right at the bottom. And so, my first question is always for whom, who is experiencing this low quality of life? Because I know it's not everyone, right? And so really trying to disaggregate this data is what we spend our days doing for organizations across the state. And, my take is that it's driven by huge disparities, right? So we have these huge gaps in Georgia that either pull us up to the tops of rankings or drag us really low.
That's a really important point because Georgia has for many years been right at the top of the list when it comes to income inequality. So what might be working for one group is certainly not working at all for another group. So that's a very important point. So let's look at that 45th out of 50 for quality of life. How important of a metric is that when we're looking at a state's overall business climate?
Yeah, I think it's an important metric overall because it starts the conversation. It draws attention to say, okay, if this is a great place to be an employer, how do we make it a great place to be an employee? And that's a lot of families, a lot of working households across our state. And so, when there's a huge kind of index or a big number like this, I think this one was 135 different measures kind of all smashed together. We've got to really figure out what's driving this, what's behind the scenes, what's pushing us to the bottom so that we can develop a solution, right? You can't just solve quality of life by itself. You've got to understand what's driving behind the numbers.
Sure, because if a business comes in and it's good for them in terms of maybe finding affordable land and there's good incentives for the business, but an employee can't get good health insurance or have access to health care, that is a tough balance to kind of work out. So in your opinion, where does Georgia seem maybe most stuck when it comes to that livability measure, despite all that business growth that we hear so much about?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. Last summer, since we're in the middle of summer, right, I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, and summer's all fun and games until you've got to figure out what to do with your kids while working. And
yes, it's true.
Last summer with Atlanta Civic Circle, and we found that about 75% of workers of the 400 or it might have been 600 folks we interviewed said that they're working fewer hours per week to handle childcare, and they couldn't find the right affordable services or programs for their kids during the summer. Well, that's going to impact productivity for employers, and maybe the solution lies on that end, right? Another thing I think about is how Metro Atlanta just moved into last place on economic mobility, right? Your ability to, if you're starting off in a low income family, your ability to get to high income by the time that you're an adult, Metro Atlanta is dead last among all metro areas. And that's driven by things like access to basic needs. We're consistently bottom 5 on access to mental health coverage, affordable child care. Preschool right now costs as much as college tuition.
Wow.
There's a shortage in affordable, quality rated programs for kids across Metro Atlanta. But then you look at, opportunities for quality education, workforce development, but especially wealth building. How do we create wealth for our kids? And these upward opportunities for our youth is a huge problem, and it's not getting better right now.
How do you build wealth when everything you're making is going to all of the places you just named? Not to mention, we see the cost of rent and the cost of real estate climbing astronomically, particularly in the last decade, and affordable housing has been an ongoing conversation we hear city leaders trying to address, but it's really a massive bucket that they're kind of trying to fill drop by drop. What data should local leaders, do you feel, be tracking maybe more closely if they want to measure and then improve Georgia's livability in a meaningful way for people?
Yeah, the stat that keeps me up at night across the 5 core counties in Metro Atlanta, Clayton, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, Gwinnett, we've got 12,000 homeless students, public school students, right? That's 1.9% of the student population, which might sound a little low on a first take, but that's just upsettingly high. That's 1 in 50 kids. So you could walk into 2 classrooms and statistically, you've likely met one homeless student that's either living in a hotel, couch surfing with friends or family, or in a shelter. Now we know that that's not evenly distributed, so this is going to be higher rates in different areas. And so, they're really focusing on the disparities, which, doesn't matter what you're mapping for Atlanta, but every map will look the same. The other thing I think a lot about is how do we build social capital for youth? Making friendships and connections across economic classes. But the last kind of data indicator I would look at is looking at what already works, especially with wealth building, like you just mentioned. The Grow Fund and Kindred Futures have been, launching baby bonds programs in Atlanta neighborhoods and in a few rural places. And we know it works. They've done the research. So with or without state support, we know some of these opportunities are working, and the evidence exists.
So important to look at the hard stuff, right? Because that's the only way you can really talk about solutions. So let's talk more about those solutions. Could private sector be a big part of this solution in boosting overall livability for everybody?
Yeah, private sector has to play a part. I mean, we're in an environment right now where whether you agree with it or not, there is less federal dollars coming into our state and our communities. And, traditional philanthropy, even if they wanted to, they cannot make up the difference, right? And so looking to corporate sponsors and employers, whether it's for policy advocacy, direct investment, or even using their platforms to promote solutions, we have to have the business community bought into this. And I know the Metro Chambers talk about economic mobility all the time. So I think it's happening. It just needs to happen at a bigger scale.
My heart sinks a little bit every time I think about this story. There's still so much shock over this past weekend's death of actor Malcolm Jamal Warner. He was vacationing in Costa Rica when he drowned, and his family has expressed deep grief, but also gratitude for an outpouring of support. Warner's journey made its way here to Atlanta, where he lived for a good while. He became an important and loved presence in our city. He starred in the hospital TV drama The Resident, a show based on an Atlanta hospital and filmed here in the A. And he performed jazz and spoken word many, many times across the metro. Here to dive into that part of Warner's life story is AJC entertainment reporter Rodney Ho. Rodney, I love following your work, and it's really good to see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I'm so sorry it's under these circumstances.
I know. I was thinking back, Rodney, there's so much nostalgia because Thursday night at my house, everything stopped because it was Cosby Show night and nobody was going to miss it. So many of us had that first connection through his role of Theo Huxtable. Would you talk more about the Malcolm Jamal Warner that Atlanta really came to know in more recent years?
Yeah, I first met him about 20 years ago. There's a woman named Joyce Littell, who's a longtime nighttime host at B103, and every year she did a big event called Passion and Poetry, which blended both, mostly poetry and music. And she had met Malcolm Jamal Warner in New York, and they became friends. And she invited him to come down. And he participated. He loved it so much. Every year he'd come back and host the event. So I got to meet him a couple times. I got to see him live, and extraordinary musician, extraordinary poet. And you realize that you see people as an actor, you see their characters, and you realize, oh, they have a lot more layers, and he's got a lot of layers.
Yeah, I'm like, you're among the lucky ones who got to see him in that element. He would describe himself as actor and poet. They would be right on that same line together. Can you tell us more about what that was like, that connection, as he put himself out there for all to see?
I don't know. I think he just brought his humanity. I mean, he grew up like under the spotlight in the 80s in a very sensitive time. You're an adolescent, and he somehow, we always hear the stories about, kid actors who don't grow up and become a mess. And, like Ron Howard and a lot of actors, he adjusted to life after Cosby. I mean, he found plenty of TV roles, and he built his life. And what's interesting is, he moved here about 6-7 years ago for The Resident. And I get the impression he really liked being semi-anonymous here. I think people treated him with respect, and they didn't treat him like Theo, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's
and,
such a
you know,
hard
he has,
transition for a child actor, like you said, because you know you don't want to be just kind of stuck in that typecast your whole life. And you know it's interesting, Rodney, because he hosted, as you know, that podcast called NA stood for Not All Hood, and he looked at the lived experiences and identities of Black people in America. And his most recent episode, he actually talked about that journey as a child actor and evolving from there. And he really talked about being grateful for the direction his life took. And he used the phrase "gratitude begets gratitude." And now that really is such maybe a cornerstone of his legacy moving forward, do you think?
absolutely. You know, I think he really understood who he was, grew comfortably into who he is. You know, he was at that point, and it's just such a shame. I feel for his family. And you know, what's interesting is he's very, very private about his family. For somebody who's so public, he has never released the name of his wife or his daughter's name. So if you could probably Google and look around, but you know, they're probably going to have a very private ceremony. This won't be a big, you know, there won't be some massive public funeral service. I think his family will mourn privately, and unfortunately for the rest of us, we'll all have to grieve in our own ways.
As AI chatbots become integrated into teenagers' daily lives, experts are raising concerns about their emotional and social impact. New research reported yesterday by the Associated Press shows that nearly 3/4 of all U.S. teens have used an AI companion app at least once. And that's slightly more than half of the teens using them regularly. This research also shows that 1 in 3 parents admit to being concerned that their teens too emotionally dependent on an AI chatbot. So let's talk more about this with David Schweidel, professor of marketing at Emory University with expertise in AI and social media. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl.
All right, I'm a parent of 3 teenagers and a 3rd grader. So I'm like leaning in and don't know really what to even do with this conversation. What do you think AI chatbots are becoming so emotionally appealing, especially to teens? I mean, saying we'd rather have that than real human interaction.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Cheryl. And this is, I've got 2 young kids at home. This gives me shades of social media all over again in terms of the lack of guardrails that exist and the need for parents really to be the ones overseeing this to the extent possible. But, as you said, and as the report had found, when people are saying, I'd rather talk to an AI than another human being, that's a little bit troubling.
Yeah, and then my first question I want to scream is why? Why? Is it because you can control the reaction? You can get the response you're looking for? It removes conflict. There's no conflict?
There's the perception that there's no judgment when you're talking to these bots. I mean, think about talking to a friend of yours. You might be on the same page most of the time, but you're not going to have the identical point of view. So these chatbots are largely going to confirm what they're being told. They're going to give you that positive feedback. They're not necessarily designed to be challenging you. So that may be part of the appeal is I have something, I want that confirmation. I'm not necessarily looking for different opinions.
Well, and then that raises an important question when we talk about kind of greater society, because you're going to meet people in your life that you don't agree with. Critical thinking is an important piece for our society as well. So without this, you're not learning to navigate any kind of differences or conflicts. Is that one of maybe the top risks you see, or what risks do you see when these AI companions start replacing real relationships?
Absolutely. I mean, AI is getting embedded into many different aspects of society. From a higher education standpoint, we're seeing students jump on using this technology. But one of the studies that's come out has said the more that you use AI, it lowers there's a correlation with reduced critical thinking. And so that's one of the big concerns is the more we rely on these technologies, we're not developing those critical thinking skills. We're becoming a little bit too reliant on this technology when it comes to work. And now, as you're seeing, when it comes to kind of, quote, social interactions with other people. And this has been a concern kind of going back to the pandemic, that children that were kind of affected by the pandemic in their elementary school years, their social development was delayed. Now we're seeing kind of the adoption of these AI companions. That's also going to further delay their ability in terms of developing those social skills and that resilience.
Interesting. So AI is significant. It's important. It's not going anywhere. It's going to expand. So the question isn't whether it's going to stick around or not. The question is, how do we best navigate it? So from a parent's perspective, how do we guide kids to understand what's real versus what's programmed, and the best way to utilize this technology but not let it be a takeaway?
First and foremost, parents have to know about the technology. So I would encourage parents to dabble with it, just to kind of be familiar with what these tools are. Like, what is Character AI? That's one of the big players in this space. So go on there, create the account so that you understand what's out there. And so that way you can have that conversation saying, hey, you want to talk to a historical figure, or you want to explore career options. Those are legitimate use cases of this technology.
Sure.
You want to have a virtual companion, a romantic partner. Maybe we need to take a beat and have a conversation about why you're feeling the need to go in that direction. I'd also kind of encourage parents to look at some of the cases that have come up already, because there's one case where a chatbot encouraged a child to commit suicide. And so, again, understanding what the risks are and having the conversations with your kids, rather than just assuming that everything's going to be okay if they go out there and use available technology.
Time for my final take. There is a new challenge for social media users, and I got to say, I like it. In fact, I love it. It's called the Flip Phone Summer, where Gen Zers are putting away their smartphones and buying basic flip phones with basic communication. Those partaking in the challenge are calling it good for detoxing from phones that take a lot of their attention and ring constantly through the day. In fact, one lady saying the challenge has been good for her. She's been listening to more nature. Wow. Others claim it has been good for them getting better sleep. All kinds of positive comments about it, but when they asked about whether they would stay with the switch, they said no. They're going back as soon as the challenge is over. Well, so much for hearing nature and connecting with what's around you. Do more of it, folks. Let me challenge you to keep it up, okay? You got the basic needs on a flip phone. You can even play a couple of those old games even, but stay with it. Talk to me. Talk to me. Thanks for joining us, folks. Have a great day, and try to encourage someone to go and use their flip phones constantly.